So the Milwaukee Bucks faced the Portland Trail Blazers in Damian Lillard's return game home. Unfortunately, it did not go too well for them, and they are now 0-2 with Doc Rivers as the head coach. Hello everybody, welcome to Awesome Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already and drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference in how this video performs in the YouTube algorithm. So on top of talking about that game, we're also going to be talking about the Heat versus the Kings because the Heat managed to get a bounce back win after literally in the last video I was talking about, or 2 videos ago, how they were not very good. They went on a 7-game losing streak. I also haven't talked about the Kings in a while, so this provides me the opportunity to do that. And I'm also going to be talking about Jalen Green, another kind of amendment to something I said recently where I was talking about Jalen and the disappointing season he's been having. That was an accurate statement. However, in the past 5 games now, he has been pretty freaking excellent, and it could be a sign that he is hopefully turning his career around. All right, so first things first, we got a Damian Lillard return game to Portland. He was met with a standing ovation from Portland's crowd, which I was glad to see. I didn't really expect too much different, but there was definitely a little bit of turmoil and drama when he left the franchise, so I thought there might be potentially a degree of animosity. But as I predicted, people were able to see through that and ultimately understand the value that Dame brought to that franchise as a whole, and thus met him with that standing ovations. That was nice. Unfortunately, though, pretty much the rest of this game did not go well for Damian Lillard. This was a really rough shooting game from him. Honestly, Damian Lillard has been pretty disappointing in a Bucks jersey. That's why it's really weird that he was an all-star starter this year. I do actually want to acknowledge, because a lot of people were confused by what I said at the time. I said that this was like Leonardo DiCaprio winning the Oscar for The Revenant. When I said that, it wasn't me saying The Revenant is a bad movie. The Revenant is pretty solid. I watched it like twice. I don't watch a movie twice unless it's pretty good. There's many movies where Leo had a stronger performance than he did in that movie, and movies that were better than that movie that he was in. So my metaphor was, he's been better, why is this when he's given the reward? Not saying The Revenant sucks, and not saying that Damian Lillard currently sucks, but when I think of Leonardo DiCaprio, I don't think of The Revenant, and when I think of Dame, as of right now, I'm sure as shit not thinking about him in a Bucks jersey, because him in a Bucks jersey has not been very good. Again, relative to the expectations of Damian Lillard. He unfortunately had a very rough shooting game in this one, below 40% from the field, and I believe below 30% from 3 as well. And Dame has the type of game where if his shots are not dropping, he really seems like a terrible player because his shot selection is just ludicrous. Obviously, we well know that Dame is not taking bad shots because those are shots he's more than capable of making. But when he's having these off shooting nights, which are becoming more and more and more frequent, well, they start to look like really bad fucking shots. Before I get more into the Bucks, let me just talk about what the Portland Trail Blazers brought to this game. Scoot Henderson had a really good first half, but he did not score any points in the second half. So 15 points in 13 minutes in the first half, and then 0 in the second. And a lot of that was because the dude is just not particularly strong at creating space. He took 2 different step backs in this game. One of them was an elbow mid-range jumper, and the other one was a corner 3. And I swear to God, from like when he caught the ball, if he had just shot it then, it would have been more space than after he did the step back. There was also like a running hook that he did against Bobby Portis where he just threw it up really fast trying to avoid the contest because he couldn't get space. So he was like, maybe if I just shoot it so fast he can't even get a hand up. Barely avoided the block, but also because the shot was so out of control it had no shot of going in. That's just the big area of concern I have for Scoot. When he's going downhill, when he's getting layups, that's great, but when it comes to creating space on the offensive end in terms of jump shots and things like that, short floaters and stuff like that, I have seen very mixed results, more so leaning towards the negative with him. DeAndre Ayton had a 20-piece in this game, which was nice to see because he has been super disappointing this year based on the expectations I had for him. I really thought 20 would be the typical Ayton performance, but unfortunately he's at about 12 points per game right now. But yeah, 20 in this one, hit a couple of free throw line jumpers. I also want to highlight Duop Reith, who has been a really good rookie for Portland. He is a stretch 5, not a particularly strong defensive player. However, his 3-ball is real. He went 2 for 2 from 3 in this one, and in general, he's shooting like 37% on a very high volume for a center in the minutes that he plays. How much he actually becomes a rotation player in the future is going to be dependent on that defense, but it is definitely a young player to be excited about for Portland, someone who could potentially be something in the future. Probably the most impressive player for Portland in this one for me was Anthony Simons, because he was doing a lot of difficult shot creation, whether it was pull-up threes or drives inside. A lot of moments where he displayed exactly what Scoot could not, by just getting a shitload of separation on his jumpers and on his floaters especially. There was a floater that he hit super late, super clutch floater that ended up really, I think, being the difference maker in this game. But speaking of the end game here, that's really where I want to jump to, because this game was close pretty much the whole way through, because unfortunately the Bucks could not hit their threes. They were below 30% from 3 in this game. That was also in spite of the fact that we got a good Giannis and a good Middleton and a decent Brook Lopez game. I do want to say one thing about Brook. While obviously 4 for 10 from 3 is pretty good on a, in a game-to-game basis, he's also shooting 35% from 3 on the season, and 3 of the 6 misses that he had from outside happened in like the last 3 minutes of the game, and they were bad shots, and he is just not a talented enough three-point shooter to justify those attempts. I really think Brook needs to chill the fuck out with some of his three-point attempts, and it probably cost them in this game. There were other things that went poorly there, but literally if he just swung the ball to someone else and got a better look than what he was doing, would have made a real world of difference. One positive or 2 positives I can throw away for the Bucks in the late game here. There was a really nice dunk from Dame. Did get a weird call from the commentator. He said it hit that like a stimulus check after he dunked it, which, what the hell does that even mean? Also, Giannis blocked a lob from to DeAndre Ayton, which was pretty reminiscent of the 21 finals. He also stopped him on the putback attempt after that, which is one of the reasons why I'm like more or less confident that the Bucks can turn around their defense and especially be a good defense in the playoffs, because Giannis just has a level of it factor as a defensive player when he's really going for it that just very few teams in the league have the luxury of a defender that talented. Late game, after Anthony Simons hits that really huge layup, Giannis is inbounded the ball, which was a questionable decision because they were down 3, and Giannis is notoriously a terrible free throw shooter, and teams already like to foul while up 3. Doc Rivers explained this decision as they thought that Giannis had the highest likelihood of getting an offensive rebound off of a second missed free throw. So they were going to go for the make one, miss one intentionally thing. However, what he failed to factor into that is that Giannis is a terrible free throw shooter, so he missed the first one. He intentionally missed the second one, but no rebound was had, and that ended the game. One thing that was weird about it was like there was definitely an attempt to intentionally foul somebody with like 2 seconds left, and the refs just kind of ate their whistle, but I don't think it would have affected the result of the game. It was just a little bit weird. But yeah, 0-2 start for Doc. They blew a big lead to the Denver Nuggets in their first game. Not a good look for him so far. This is kind of already off to a rough start. I'm going to be more than charitable, though, and give him plenty of time to figure this out. I don't like the Doc signing. I've made that very clear. And I just don't know if it's going to be anything less than what it has been thus far, which is pretty bad. But we're going to move on to the Heat versus the Kings. Decided to watch this game specifically just because, as I mentioned again, I haven't talked about the Kings as much lately, and the Heat got a bounce-back win. A lot of this was thanks to Jimmy Butler, who had a really aggressive game, especially in the first quarter, and pretty much whenever Jimmy does this, it's like, oh yeah, the Miami Heat can be just a kick-ass team. It's just determined based on whether or not Jimmy feels like getting a very casual 18 points or gunning for it and getting 31 like he did in this game on 10 for 14 shooting, 9 for 12 from the line. That is some truly excellent efficiency. 80% true shooting percentage. Also got 7 boards and 6 assists. There were also some weird back and forth in this game. The Heat actually started off really strong, and about midway through the second quarter, they were up by 18 points. However, by about the 8-minute mark of the third quarter, the Kings had taken the lead back, but then following that, pretty much from there, it was Miami the whole way through. So what went right for Miami in this game that has not gone right for them before? Well, the three-point shooting was definitely a very prevalent factor in it, but probably the biggest thing was the playmaking. As a whole, they had 38 assists on the game as a team, which is really good, and 18 of those assists came from Terry Rozier and Tyler Hero. Tyler Hero with 8, Terry with 10. Terry really couldn't score the ball in this one. However, it was a good distribution game for him, and again, Jimmy was going off. I think Bam had a pretty good game, and the most significant thing, probably above all, was that Jason Richardson had 24 points in 27 minutes. I said fucking Jason Richardson again. I have notes for these games, and Rudy underlined Josh for me because I kept calling him fucking Jason Richardson. Jason Richardson retired in 2014? Josh Richardson, 24 points in 27 minutes. That after getting a DNP just 2 games ago, rather. Probably not going to be getting any more DNPs if he keeps playing like that. I also would like to point out a quote from Terry Rozier, who said that Heat culture is the total opposite of Charlotte's losing mindset. It's kind of your DNA. So that's interesting. I compared it to the way that Charlotte operates. It's almost like a shitty restaurant that pays their employees minimum wage and doesn't pay attention to them. And then you go there and it's like, yeah, no wonder this restaurant sucks. You don't do anything right from just the ground up. The Heat do things very right and manage to maximize otherwise limited talent. That's just something I felt like highlighting. On the Sacramento Kings end of things, we got a really good game from Keegan Murray and Domantas Sabonis, but unfortunately not so much from really anybody else, especially De'Aaron Fox. Also, over his last 4 games, Harrison Barnes has actually averaged 26 points per game. He had 12 in this one, a fairly quiet game. Or maybe it was even less than that. So, not that I expected him to continue to average that many points, but that's been a positive factor for them lately that they could not bank on here. Keegan Murray, as I mentioned, really good game. He had 33 points on 87% true shooting. He went 7 for 11 from 3, 12 for 18 from the field as a whole. And, again, not just doing this from 3. He got 5 different field goals outside of the 3-point line. Got a putback dunk, couple of backdoor cuts. I think a couple of assists from Domantas Sabonis, especially a short lob I can recall. Sabonis in this game actually finished with 19 points, 17 rebounds, and 13 assists, doing so on 57 true shooting, so that's not as great. Really good production from him. However, the Heat were pretty determined to win this game, and I just don't think that they had much of a shot, especially with a quiet De'Aaron Fox performance. Next, let's talk about Jalen Green. I passively said that Jalen had been bad this year recently when I talked about the Rockets versus whoever the hell I was talking about. I don't remember what game that was. They've been an okay team. They've been a decent team in the Western Conference, which is to be expected given all the signings that they've had. However, the difference between them being an okay team and an actually good team in the Western Conference, to me, is Jalen Green. And unfortunately, throughout most of this year, he has, if anything, regressed from what he's shown us in the past. I actually predicted going into this season that Jalen would have his breakout year and be a 26 to 28 point per game score. Has not happened yet. However, this recent stretch does give me hope. I've seen a lot of people just straight up give up on the star potential of Jalen Green based on this year. And I definitely understand where some of the frustration lies. And as someone who doesn't think highly of the archetype of player that Jalen Green is, that is a shot-creating, ball-handling guard who isn't a very talented playmaker and especially isn't very efficient, that makes it even worse. That is definitely a type of player that I don't care for. However, do still want to point out this recent stretch of games where he is averaging 30 points, 4 assists, and 7 rebounds on 51, 36, 93 splits. That's awesome. They technically lost 3 out of those 5 games, so my theory of like him being the difference between them being great and not is maybe not holding all that true. However, I do think in the right context that can indeed be true, and there were other players that were slacking in some regard that actually allowed this to happen. But yeah, I just wanted to point that out. Jalen Green's been really good lately, and I do have hope for his potential to turn this thing around. So yeah, that's it. Shout out to Nick for editing this video, and goodbye.